Welcome to Shelf Talkers, a podcast from Village Well Books and Coffee in downtown Culver City. Hey there, villagers. It is Jared here, of course, with my co-host, Julia. How are you, Julia?
Hey, Jared. I'm glad to be here. We haven't been in the studio in a little bit. And my studio...
I mean, a crowded office.
With lots of books all around.
With so many books. Guys, if you could see the number of books, my guess is if you guessed, you'd be too low. Julia, your birthday was last week, is that right?
Yeah, I had a big old birthday party on Saturday. And you know what I should have done?
What?
I should have asked everybody to drop that 5-star review because
at the party. Yeah. If you want to have a present to me, get out your phones right now. Get on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
Let's go.
If it's not honest, we don't want it. But if it's not 5, we also don't want it.
Not that interested.
Because they were telling you that they listen.
I know. It turns out, guys, that...
Turns out your friends support you.
Yeah, it turns out my friends don't just support me and the Shelf Talkers podcast, but they're thoroughly entertained. Everybody had a lot of good things to say, and you know what? I should have just turned that into a 5-star review.
A 5-star review. You told me you got a pretty unique present too, right?
Yeah. So a lot of my friends that came through the party are folks from USC or folks that work in the film industry, a lot of screenwriters. So everybody sort of knows each other and all that. And one of my friends who came through helped with the hot dog grilling. His name's Eric. He is decidedly not in the film industry, and he just likes to fish, specifically.
Love that.
Spear fishing. And so the gift that I got from him was a spear gun. So that was fun.
To take to our plentiful lakes and rivers full of fish.
Yeah, everybody listened to the podcast 2 weeks ago about California coast.
Yes.
Yeah, we're always starting to go out in the coast.
Good way to enjoy the coast some more. I love how you connected the fact that he's not a writer to therefore outdoorsy.
Sure, right. Yeah, the way to describe my buddy Eric is if the apocalypse or any sort of crazy event happens where we're going to need to natural
event.
To him. Yeah. Natural event or whatever.
Because he didn't spend his time figuring out words.
Yeah.
He spent his time figuring out survival skills.
Yeah.
Something that I hope I never have to learn. But yeah, the last few weeks, I was actually in Europe for the last couple of weeks, which was a really good time. Yeah, just with my wife, we went to Prague and Vienna and Slovenia, which was really fun. There's so many there's castles everywhere in Europe, but if you don't know, in Slovenia and most of the Balkan or former Yugoslavic countries, they all have so many castles. Every few miles you see a cool castle. It's the highest castle density per capita in Europe. So if you want to see a castle, you go to Croatia or Slovenia or Serbia. That's not why we went, but there were a lot of castles. Very fun.
So my family is a joke. Another boring castle, we call it ABC.
The ABCs of Europe?
Yeah, the ABCs, we do our best politely, if we're with a tour guide, politely avoid the ABC. But sounds like you and your wife were...
I'm into it.
Yeah, going...
Give me a funicular to the top of a castle, I'm in.
Yeah, thorough castle goers.
Yeah, absolutely. Or we can see that part again in a second.
I kind of like little...
It's a nice little vulnerability.
No, a little ethnography of the space.
Ethnography of the space.
Yeah, y'all are getting
I bet there's
feel.
a podcast called Ethnography of Space.
It's definitely an approach to, storytelling, to audio storytelling. There are different qualities of audio in this podcast, namely because there's so
That's
much
a great
shifting.
segue into the interview.
Well, I did want to mention...
Yes.
Just because there's only so much big news that happens in the world of books.
Because there's so many books and so many rise and fall, and most of them are very good, but they don't always make waves.
They don't make waves like the New York Times best books of the 21st century list, 100 best books of the 21st century list makes waves.
Yeah, if y'all could have seen the ripple caused in the book world when that list came out recently, we have been excited.
Right away, our own Colin Hinckley created a very amazing display right when you walk into Village Well. You'll see. Yeah. There's if you want to see the books featured on the New York Times 100 best books of the 21st century, you can come into Village Well. We have it here. Physically, you can see the books, flip through them, buy them. They're actually selling very well compared to our other books just because of that article, which is just very fun. People love reading things that other people say is really good. Who would have thought? Yeah, who would have thought? Well, actually, I could have guessed. But the best book as is determined is My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. One of my absolute favorite books.
That was number one?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even catch that. Wow. Yeah. That's one of your favorite books.
Yeah, I only read 16 books. I'm being talking about vulnerability. Yeah.
To be honest, 16 books out of the 100 is higher than most.
Well, if I'm hosting a book podcast, I think it should be.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I mean, you must have really good taste because their number one book is one of your favorite books.
That's fair.
Which means, like, wow, your taste is immaculate.
I tore through that book.
But yeah, like we mentioned, the sound quality differs at times. Sometimes we're in this office, sometimes we're in a conference room, sometimes we're in a WeWork conference rooms. In the early episodes, a couple times we recorded intros in our cars. I mean, there have been fascinating workarounds that we have figured out for this beautiful podcast. The reason we're saying that is just, you might notice on this upcoming interview for this episode, it's a little echoey. We're going to consider that just a beautiful artifact of the shifting architecture of the fact that we are expanding, we are moving. The walls barely existed at the point that we recorded that in the conference room.
Yeah, it was a big open space.
Yeah, it was a much different space than usual. So I don't think it's too noticeable, but just wanted to call it out so you understand. But this interview we have for you today is such a fun delight because it's also with a comedian and writer. His name is Jordan Morris. Jordan's YA graphic novel Youth Group came out on July 16th, which is the week that this episode drops, and explores a group of Orange County evangelical youths who must team up with the youth of other religions to exorcise demons. Jordan is also the co-host of the popular comedy podcast Jordan Jesse Go, and a recurring cast member on Good Mythical Morning, one of the most popular shows on YouTube.
We had to get a call out to Jared's wife, who is also a producer on Good Mythical Morning. Yeah, she's a
producer for Good Mythical Morning, which was one of the connections that made this interview possible. Yeah, so in the conversation, we talk about the graphic novel publishing process, how he threaded his own personal details into this story of demons and the supernatural, the subtle criticisms about the evangelical subculture that are within the book, and writing a coming-of-age young adult story. Get into it. I am Jared, and of course, I'm here with my co-host and co-bookseller, Julia. Julia, how are you today?
Hey, I'm good. Trying not to sigh through this June gloom time of year, but it's good. I think today I'm going to be very bright and happy. Yeah,
bright and happy.
Yeah.
You're doing returns today on the book side in the shop. One of your favorite things.
Yeah, my solitude. I like solitude, guys.
And just get to look through some books and return them.
And become a professional label peeler. What we have to do when we return the books is take our Village Well labels off. So that's like half my job.
Well, this week on the podcast, we have our guest, Jordan Morris. Jordan, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing great. I gotta say, big gloom guy over here. I love June gloom.
You're the right person.
I don't mean to
I'm not about it.
Yeah, well,
I don't think we're going to get along.
But this is going to be a spicy episode. That's what the people want.
I do love in LA when clouds come out, I'm like, oh, this feels more like real life.
I didn't sign up for the Pacific Northwest. I did not sign up for the Pacific Northwest.
You don't want to wear a light jacket.
No. I signed up for swimsuits and sun, and that's
tops down on the convertible.
Yeah, that's not actually what it is in real life.
Nobody's picturing driving through sunset with clouds in the sky.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jared.
Yeah, you don't want to, whistle at hunks on Venice Beach who are in cardigans.
Yeah.
Who are having to dress up in extra sweaters. Love that. Well,
we should make this quick too, because I need to go whistle at some hunks down at Venice Beach.
That's right. We're real close now.
I mean, you're already on the west side, so you're practically,
we're practically on the beach.
They're going to be here any second. On Shelf Talkers, we love to kind of open up the floor with just talking through what a shelf talker would be for your book. Now, for the listener or for Jordan who might not know, a shelf talker is one of those cards that we put up on the bookshelf that has like a 2 to 3 sentence summary or vibe check about what the book is about. So would you be willing to write a shelf talker for your newest graphic novel, Youth Group?
Yeah, I think I could do that. It is Youth Group. Spooky. Funny. Friendship. A little bit of romance, demons, song parodies.
Yes.
These are the things that are in this book. How's that?
I love it. I think you stuck
plug it down your $17.99,
and it's a graphic novel.
And it's a graphic novel.
So beautiful art as well.
Beautiful art, yes, by a great artist named Bowen McCurdy, whose work you might know from a great series called Spectre Inspectors and Marvel Comics. Yeah, Bowen's a genius and just drew the hell out of this book. A wonderful collaborator. And did I say genius? Bowen's a genius.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Had you worked together in the past?
No, we had not. We were paired up for this project by the publisher for Second. So I didn't have an artist in mind when I pitched the book. And they are like, we're going to send you a couple of artists. Here's the first one we like, Bowen McCurdy. I looked at the art. I say, no need to send me anyone else. If we can, get get Bowen McCurdy, and they did. And yeah, I was really
wonderful,
thrilled that Bowen wanted to sign on for this. Obviously, a very full dance card. Bowen has a lot in the works, doing a lot, and the fact that they wanted to come on and do this book with me was such a thrill.
When they have such almost like a punk rock vibe to some of it, but it also might have been your directive through the book's ideas. But it's interesting to see that paired with this heavily evangelical setting, which is not always a punk rock setting.
I will say that the book is very much based in my personal experience growing up in Orange County, California. In the 90s. That's funny. The book is set in the 90s. That was not part of the original pitch. The editor, Callista Brill, who I worked with on this, she's the one who I kind of worked on the pitch with, and she's like, I like this. Can we set it in the 90s? And I think what she was getting at was a couple things. First, it was just it's fun, right? You do a lot of references. You get to see the fashion. Who doesn't like a throwback? But also, I think what she saw in my pitch, which I didn't see at the time, was that this guy's doing something personal. This is very much based in his personal experience and kind of writing about childhood. So let's just set it in the 90s and
let's lean into that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that was a great pitch. I think it really helped the book, and definitely
How far along were you in the writing of it? Did you guys change the setting?
Let's see. I had already done the pitch and a couple of pages of it. I had to add pagers into a couple of moments where there were cell phones before. A little bit of that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, because you say in the acknowledgments, right, that they helped you tap into that personal, and you called it a deeply personal story, which I think is kind of a funny idea that this story of demonic exorcism is a deeply personal story, but obviously you see it in the context. How did that kind of play out as far as diving into the personal once you found that?
Yeah, so I am typically not a very personal writer, right? Okay. I write for animation and late night, and I do bits on Good Mythical Morning. I don't go out of my way to include personal details in any of that stuff, and I've never been a stand-up comic. I did a little bit of open mic stand-up when I first moved to LA. Not good at it. I wisely abandoned it. Good move, Jordan.
And you're very character-based, I would say, from what I've seen of you.
Yeah, the bits I do on Good Mythical Morning are in weird wigs and stuff like that. Yeah. Doing memoir or personal stand-up is never something that I've been good at or been super interested in. I like it when others do it. There's obviously great geniuses who do that kind of thing.
It's interesting you're saying that. Even for the past 10 years, really, in the past 15 years, having to write from your own personal experience is the taproot that everybody is in entertainment, in Hollywood, in whether it's comedy or drama or even animation. I guess it's heartening to hear that, you can kind of operate just with your voice.
Yeah, totally. And I've never been when I like an idea, I like it because it's funny or it seems like it has possibilities, not this tells my story. Yeah. And again, I like creativity in that mold. It's just never been my thing. There's a lot of phases in doing a graphic novel. You read the script and then you see the pencils, which is the very rough outline, and then you see the inks and then you see the colors. These are all phases where you have to proofread. And the first time I read it back, I'm oh, I am writing about my childhood, and I am unpacking things I had anxiety about in my childhood. And I didn't set out to do it. It wasn't part of the pitch. I just with this story about goofballs fighting demons, I just used a lot of personal details because they fit. They worked, right? It's Orange County, it's the 90s. I'll just throw in some personal stuff because I need details and I have them in my brain.
And it's going to help root it in the 90s when you're pulling out your childhood in the 90s.
Well, so what demonic things happened in your childhood?
Well, I was possessed all throughout high school. My demon was the valedictorian, and I barely scooted by with a C- average.
That's so good.
We were a real odd couple, my demon and I. A little bit of will they, won't they tension too. Anyway, so it is kind of accidentally this personal thing. But to circle back to your question about the punk rock details and about it being unusual, Orange County in the 90s, Green Day.
Sure.
No doubt. The ska revival. Punk rock was in the air, man. Punk rock was everywhere. We were taking a look at the system and saying, no, thanks. I think that those details that are a little punky are just kind of like the style at the time. Like, I am a big punk fan.
Yeah.
But wasn't like consciously putting any of that in there. I think that like part of the project too was Bowen asked for a playlist for all of the characters. Like, so I just made a little YouTube playlist. Bowen is very annoyingly 27 and does not remember the 90s. So I'm like, well, there were these girls and they were spicy. We called them the Spice Girls, and everyone had slap bracelets and just talking like an old man.
And those chokers.
The wallets had chains. Because we were worried that the wallets were going to get stolen. Anyway.
No, it's just going back to Bowen's illustrations.
Yeah.
I'm reading the graphic novel. I'm thinking, I've seen these illustrations before. And you guys had such a sync.
Yeah.
And you guys just made something that felt really accessible. Like, there's something familiar about the art. But what's that collaboration like? Do you send them a script? Is it like a screenwriting script? Or
Yeah. So there's a great book that I read before starting comics called Words for Pictures. It's by Brian Michael Bendis, one of the great geniuses of comics. And like, it really helped me like start this. It basically, like, for comics, there's not really a set format for what the script looks like. Like, every writer's script is going to look a little bit different. Like, when you write a screenplay for TV, it's in a program called Final Draft. Right. I think there's a couple others you can use, but they always kind of look the same.
Yeah.
And
like, they're off of a typewriter, but they're from a software that you downloaded on the
So comics doesn't really have that. Like, if you, for the different like big companies like Marvel and DC, and I did some stuff for Archie, and Archie kind of has a way they like things presented. But for something like this, a like creator-owned graphic novel, not really. And I think the advice that I got in that book was like, ask the artist what they want. Like, after you're done with the story, this is now their project, right? Like, you set them up for success, ask them what they like to draw, ask them what they don't like to draw. If they don't like to do crowds, don't write a bunch of fucking scenes in a crowd. Set them up for success. And kind of one of those things was just like, ask them how they want the script. And so I just kind of asked Bowen like what they wanted and how this would be the most fun for them to draw, and Bowen just was like, give me a screenplay. So the script for Youth Group is a little bit different than a screenplay in some ways, but I wrote it in Final Draft and some stuff like that. So there's some
that's fascinating.
Yeah,
because so my background is in screenwriting, and I work with directors, and I'm just thinking it's almost the same as a writer-director relationship, where you're like, oh, what do you want to direct?
And how much would be like directing on the page, and how annoying would that be? How many things of like, you don't need to tell me what color this is going to be.
Right. Yeah. And Bowen made a lot. I mean, speaking of color, like, Bowen made a lot of great choices with the colors, and the different like scenes have different color schemes based on kind of what's emotionally going on in the scene. And that's I didn't like direct that at all. Like, that was all just like a Bowen inspiration, and I think it turned out so beautifully.
Yeah, really did. I love that. I mean, so when you came up with the idea for this story, and it became this personal story, I know you'd already written one graphic novel before, Bubble, right? Or was there more than that?
Bubble. Bubble, I will say, I co-wrote with a great writer named Sarah Morgan, the art in that book by a great artist named Tony Cliff, and it was based on a scripted podcast, right. Which had a lot of different people working on it too. But the comics version of Bubble, written by me and Sarah.
Yeah, beautiful. And so that was kind of your first entry into graphic novel space. So when you had the idea for this story, were there other mediums that you thought of creating this story in, or was graphic novel always kind of in your mind for this story?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a pretty comic book-y story, right? It's about kids fighting demons, and
it'd be very fun to have visually in panels.
Yeah, totally. So I kind of had the idea for a while and had some kind of nuggets of the story and stuff like that. But then when I started doing the project with for second, the Bubble book, I was like, oh yeah, now that I have a comic book editor and publisher who will listen to me and accept my emails, that's kind of when I started putting it together.
obviously the setting of youth group is Orange County in the 90s, evangelical subculture.
Yes.
And even you're talking about punk rock, and which is interesting because Orange County in the 90s is part of the explosion of like the megachurch movement in America within evangelicalism and stuff. And so it's interesting to read because I think when you see a title called youth group, and I'm, as one who grew up in a Southern Baptist youth group in Indiana, like that has so many connotations to it. And so you wrote clearly based on your personal experience on it, and the beauty of the personal comes through very much. But there's also this interesting, like, there are moments where you portray the youth group leaders very positively. They're kind of the progressive boundary pushers. And then there are other times where the pastor or potentially the youth group leader is a little bit more rigid. And you kind of play with that too, where it feels like, I would venture, it almost feels like there's a bit of a, obviously like a moving on from maybe the religious institution that you grew up in, but like, what does that relationship look like in you? Because it at least feels like there's a tension there in the book between like almost like admiration for like the beautiful mentorship that takes place in the book, but also like so many rigid flaws within that subculture.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was conscious about not making the youth group people like religious villains. And I like religious villains. Like, I like them in other media. And to be clear, there are a lot of real life religious villains.
Amen.
They
Amen.
exist.
Yeah.
And I don't think the book is trying to say like, come on, they're all right. I
Totally.
But I don't know. I don't think this is the story. I don't think the story is like,
If evil pastor.
Youth group leaders are evil. And I did experience some like crummy youth group leaders growing up, but I think I also experienced a lot of them who were like goofballs that meant well, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, the religious person we all wish we knew is like, hey, that Jesus guy said some great stuff, tolerance, helping the poor. That which you do to the least of my brothers is that what you do to me. Who can't get behind that, right? That's great. So yeah, I kind of wanted to have the characters be that sort of religious person. You do have characters who are using religion wrongly and for selfish ways in the book, but I think the like main characters everyone like disagrees a little bit, and everybody has a different view on how religious you should be and where it should fit into your life, but they all have to work together just because there's fucking demons and we need to kill them. And yes, we have differences. We do, but we need to kill the demons because they will kill us. So yeah, that was the thinking on like what types of religious people to make them.
Yeah, like I said, it's just so funny to see all the youth group elements too. I mean, the jars of clay reference cracked me up.
Oh yeah,
yeah. DC Talk, jars of clay. I mean, these were
huge
Jesus
legends of Christian rock.
Adrenaline. Oh my gosh,
punk. I mean,
oh yeah,
that was punk for the Christian world in a weird way. I was like, I mean, Jesus Freak. I mean, that is that is them trying to be punk as much as they possibly can be.
They gave it a shot. Julia, did you have a religious organization as a kid?
Indeed, I'm from Arkansas, so.
Okay.
My father is excommunicated from the Catholic Church, or exiled from the Catholic Church, and hard line atheist. But he knows everything there is to know about the Bible. It's annoying. But in any case, you're in Arkansas, there's no other camp to go but Jesus camp.
Right.
Both my parents worked full time, and so my father, I'm sure, was just like, yes, like let's try a new camp. And I have memories of us being dropped off. You drive like 40 minutes into the Arkansas wilderness, and then there's a huge crucifix at the front of the camp.
Wow.
And he's like, dang it. And I went to 3 different Jesus camps as a kid in middle school. So youth group, I understand it. And so, it's where you hang out. It's where your friends hang out. It's where you go.
Well, I do think that's one of the things that the book does well is, like you're saying, like provide the beautiful picture of like what a mentor could be. Because I think to me, like, I definitely, like I said, I grew up very Southern Baptist, and while I no longer like institutionally belong in any, institutional church, I still consider myself a person of faith, and my spirituality is very important to me. But the thing that I think I miss the most about institutions of faith is the idea of like mentors, especially for young people.
Yeah.
And when you have like a actually healthy mentor, that can like totally change a teenager's life, especially if they don't have one like in their normal home or family, right, that they're going back to. And so I think it is interesting that like even in the mix of the like clear critique on the lack of interreligious dialogue and all these other elements of the book, that you have this beautiful through line of like taking Kay under their arm is what allowed her in the book to blossom into this beautiful student. Yeah,
that was actually the most interesting part, is the interfaith third act. Is that something you were always very crystal clear on?
Yeah, I had always
not to spoil it too much if you don't want us to go into that.
No, that's okay. Listeners. Happy to talk about it. Yeah, so I think you learn as the book goes that there are not only evangelical demon fighters, but just demon fighters of every faith. And I think that like when I was kind of noodling on this idea and like working out the specifics, I would talk to friends about like, oh, did you have like a young person's religious thing growing up? Because, I had mine, and mine was ultra specific, but just like Jewish people did and Muslim people did. Like there's a version of this. And I think it's just that like part of it's functional, right? Like we need a place to put the teenagers. Like where do we put the teenagers while their parents are at church? Like they don't want to sit in church. Like where do we put them? Or whatever service, we need something to do with the teenagers, but also just like, you're a zealot when you're a young person. Like you have feelings, you have hormones, exactly. And like everything's big and everything's 10 out of 10. And like, it's just a good time to hook someone into a faith, or political ideologies, because you're so intense.
Yeah, it's so fervent.
And you'll eat anything up that a leader tells you, especially if you maybe don't have like a positive attachment to your family.
No, I haven't thought about that specifically, like just how fervent you are. Of course, but I was in youth groups through middle school, and then once middle school wrapped, and my father was like, please, no more. Like, can the kids not go to youth group anymore? Because he's such a, as I said, hardline atheist. And then we just got so into volunteering at the soup kitchen.
Yeah, totally. So I think just in working out the logic of the world, I'm like, oh, well, if the Christians have a little organization of young demon fighters, probably everybody does, right? Because like demons don't just attack people of one religion, right? They're just killing humans.
Yeah.
They're just bad.
Yeah, that's
non-denominational.
So if the idea is just that every organization just has this and they go about it their own way, and maybe they fight demons of a certain mythology. So that was just like kind of a fun idea I had about the logic of the world. But I think ended up being kind of a theme of the book is that like, this is a problem for everyone. How can we all work together to fix it?
Yeah. And I don't want to read too much into it, but it feels like then with that theme or through line, you can start seeing the demons as so many different things, as fascism, as homelessness, as, so many different things of like, the only way we're going to beat this is if we all come together, and don't silo ourselves into these different religious holes. I don't know if that's what you're necessarily going for, but that's, I think, what I walked away with.
That is something that I believe, when you're an agnostic person, or you're an atheist, or you're a person who doesn't have a lot of religious practice in your life, and you look at religious kooks on the news, you're like, volunteer at the soup kitchen, help go dig a well somewhere, like it's in there, it's in the scripture. I don't know what one you read, but it's in there. Like, and you just kind of wish everyone would find the common thing and do that rather than all the other shit they do.
Well, it's interesting because whenever I tell people that I'm from Arkansas, then it's sort of, we start talking about the fact that I went to Jesus camp, and I wonder if either of y'all get this, but people are so interested.
Yeah, totally.
So interested in this idea of the evangelical church, of the idea of going to a Jesus camp. I think there was a documentary that came out early aughts that was like kind of the beginning of the documentary wave, and it was called Jesus Camp. And I watched it, and the tenor of the doc is that these people are kooks, right?
Yeah.
And I watched it, I was like, oh, that wasn't too different from my experience.
Yeah.
Which is to say, I think I was pretty aware, and I think everybody is pretty aware that what we're doing is flamboyant.
Sure.
But as you said, we all have this pent-up energy, and we have to express it some way. And if we're doing it together as a group. But I just think it's interesting, like, the way that people get so curious and fascinated about that. Yeah, this kind of denomination of religious expression. And is that something as you were pitching it, were you kind of considering that?
The pitch was very much just rooted in like, this is a funny idea. Yeah. Wouldn't it be funny?
It is a funny
idea.
The
juxtaposition. Huh? Yeah, the juxtaposition of those two ideas. Yeah.
Just what if these goofballs had to do exorcisms? They probably would do a bad job. They're goofballs. It started out as kind of a fluffier, like pure comedy idea, but just because of what it was, and first second, the publisher was pretty open to me, like kind of, and a lot of stuff changed from the pitch, by the way. I think, the pitch I sent them was pretty different than this. So I think they were just open to like, following the good ideas and, putting in some bigger themes that felt like they fit.
It sounds like they trust your comedic voice in that.
Yeah.
Thanks. I hope so. Yeah, they've been great partners for these books. If you like comics, for a second, they make such beautiful books and they work with such great people. So yeah, they're lovely folks. Wonderful. And great to work for.
So I just have another question about collaboration, and then we'll weasel our way out. But you said it's like it found its way to being fairly different from the original idea. And was that through your collaboration? I'm sure it was your collaboration with Bowen and your editor. But can you kind of tell a story of like, when you realize, this is the direction we should go in versus that?
Yeah, totally. I actually have a pretty good example of that. Like, so the pitch of the book included a romance between two of the characters. And I'm like, well, this is like, it's a YA book. It's set, the characters are, teens and 20s. There's going to be a little bit of romance because obviously, I think, in the youth groups we went to, there was always a little bit of romance. And that's why a lot of people go to those for the first time, is that like, and
stick around.
Someone told you to come.
Yeah.
Someone told you like, me and my friends do this pretty cool thing on Sundays where we talk about teen issues. And then you're like, oh yeah, I gotta get there. So there was a romance between two of the characters. And as I was writing, I'm just like, this doesn't work. These scenes suck. This doesn't, I kind of just crammed them together in the pitch because they were like of a similar age. And I'm like, these characters will probably fall in love. And they just didn't as I was writing it. Then Bowen came on and I started reading Bowen's work, kind of thinking about what Bowen drew, and it like opened me up to some other possibilities of how the romance element would fit in. And I don't want to like spoil a bunch of stuff. This is all like kind of annoyingly vague, I realized, but like I figured out that this romance didn't work for this one character because that's not who they were. And so, I kind of started thinking about, who might this character fall in love with, or who else in the story might they be into? And I think it created a little story for this character that I didn't think of in the beginning. Yeah, definitely wasn't in the original pitch, but I think worked out really well just because Bowen being there and being inspired by some of Bowen's other work, and it helped me think about some other stuff that might be better for this character.
And that was
and that's all annoyingly vague, I realize.
And that was reading Bowen's other graphic novels they illustrated, or when you say Bowen's work?
Oh yeah, Bowen's other graphic novels. Bowen also a very good writer too.
Right. Rad.
So it was fun kind of thinking about that Brian Michael Bendis idea of like, how can you give them something that they like to draw? So
a couple very logistical questions that I'm just curious about for the graphic novel art form. How long did it take you to write this?
Let's see. How long did maybe like 3 months, 4 months?
Pretty
somewhere in that
writing.
zone. Yeah.
How long is when you say you wrote it in Final Draft as a script? This is like a 260-page graphic novel, right? How many Final Draft pages?
Sure. The script for this, I realize, is 101 pages, the exact same length as the Bubble graphic novel.
Oh no way.
Which it's my day-to-day editor on this is a great comics writer named Ben Wilgus. Ben Wilgus, great genius, great editor. Great comics person. Check him out. But Ben's like, hey, you realize this script is the exact same length as the Bubble script. I'm not shooting for it, but yeah, just kind of an interesting little coincidence. So 101 pages.
That's just where your brain starts to feel it out.
I'm done. Whatever.
And now I'm curious about once you say you're writing it 3 to 4 months, and then the illustrations, I'm sure, are happening in tandem.
In this case, I think just because Bowen's dance card is so full, we had to wait for a while for Bowen to get done with a couple other projects. So I had written this, and it took it took a while for Bowen to get started. So I think sometimes maybe your writing and drawing happen a little more side by side, but I think in this case the script was done for a while before Bowen started.
And then the actual illustrations take
years, a long time. Okay. So this and especially, so first, second, they do big graphic novels and not, like floppy monthly issues you get in a comic shop. So just and they're nice looking books too. And that means they take a while. So but Youth Group has been in the works for a long time.
Cool.
Yeah.
Love that.
Congratulations.
It's I love how it turned out too.
No, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's rad.
It's going to be great. And it comes out on July 16th.
July 16th?
And this episode drops July 17th in our current schedule. So it's going to be the perfect timing for this.
Amazing.
Our final question that we do ask to bookend it, pun intended.
Love it.
For the Shelf Talkers is if somebody enjoys Youth Group or just enjoys the conversation that we just had or enjoys you as an author, what are maybe 3 other books that you would recommend either within the same genre or just that come to mind based on this conversation?
Yes, I read a great book recently. It's another first, second book, so I'm log rolling for them a little bit. I love them. Was a fan even before we started working together. There's a great book out from one of my favorite comics writers, Jean Luen Yang, and he did this book with a great artist named Luyen Pham. I think I'm pronouncing her name right. It's called Lunar New Year Love Story. It is a rom-com about, it's a pretty basic rom-com setup premise. It is a teen girl who has to choose between 2 hunky guys. One's a little more gregarious, one's a little more introverted, so she's got to pick. But there's so much other shit in this book. It's very rich. It's kind of supernatural. It's a weird ghost story too. This character sees the various iterations of various Catholic saints who pop up to her and give her advice and stuff like that. She has a very complicated family history that kind of gets unpacked. So Lunar New Year Love Story, it's a great example of fairly familiar setup that goes into some wild places and it has a lot going on. So Lunar New Year Love Story, get it.
That's also a graphic novel.
Also graphic novel. Yeah. Cool. Let's see. I also love the short stories of Karen Russell. Karen Russell, one of my favorite writers. She had one of my favorite books of hers is Vampires in the Lemon Grove, and it is genre-y short stories that have a pretty hearty emotional core and are real weird. They're real weird. They kind of start with the genre, but then they just go off into some wacko places. The kind of, there's a story about sports fans who root for whales and sports fans who root for krill, and how the sports fans who root for the krill lose every year, but they still root for the krill. Hilarious and weird.
That is hilarious.
Everything Karen Russell does.
That sounds right up my alley.
Yes, it's great.
You don't see enough humorous short stories.
Yeah.
You really don't.
I'm looking for them all the time.
Yeah.
So everything by Karen Russell, but Vampires in the Lemon Grove is one of my favorite books. It's a short story collection.
Cool.
And I think if you like Youth Group, a nice companion piece is a book that came out recently. This is by Maggie Tokuda Hall and Faith Schaefer did the illustrations. Another graphic novel. It's called The Worst Ronin. And it is the story of, kind of a grizzled, hard-drinking samurai who has to take on an impetuous young samurai. It's got this great logic where it seems to be set in feudal Japan, but they all have cell phones and no one explains it. And Maggie's one of my favorite comics writers, and just everything she does is so amazing. And Faith Schaefer, a great illustrator. You've seen her illustrations all over comics if you're a comics reader. So the Worst Ronin. It is funny, it's weird, just fun beginning to end. That came out a couple months ago and is great.
Love that. Well, those are really fun. It's fun to even get graphic novel suggestions because I think you're our first graphic novel guest.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
And I think those are the first graphic novel suggestions too. So that's fun to see. Hopefully those can populate our shelves pretty soon too. If anybody wants to order a book through us.
Yes, absolutely. The Village Well, gorgeous bookstore here in Culver City. Great coffee. They gave me a nice decaf iced tea. Complimentary for being on the podcast. We love them. And obviously you can get Youth Group anywhere you get a book, but hey, support a great local indie, The Village Well. And if anybody orders it through The Village Well, I will sign and personalize it. So y'all ship anywhere, right?
We sure do.
Worldwide?
We should.
Yeah, you do. You do actually worldwide.
We're doing a surprising amount of shipments to the UK, I will say.
Beautiful. Yeah. So I guess no matter where you're listening to this, go on the Village Well website, which is villagewell.com.
Yes, you're so perfect at this. Yeah.
Order up youth group, and I'm sure there'll be a area there for
comments. Yeah.
So say, what do you want signed? What do you want personalized?
Absolutely.
And you get a book.
And Jordan will come by, sign it, and we'll ship it out to you.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm happy to do it. Indie bookstores, they're great. If you're listening to this podcast, you know that. But I love them, and it's a great place to get a book.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Jordan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This was great. This was so fun. I feel like my childhood has been uncovered and revealed. So thank you.
Yeah, we had a great time with you, Jordan.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Looking for links to the books mentioned in this episode of Shelf Talkers? Looking for ways to connect with this week's guest? Maybe you want to reach out to us about thoughts or questions for the podcast. For all of that, check out the show notes beneath the episode. You can also order your books online through villagewell.com. This episode of Shelf Talkers is brought to you by Village Well Books and Coffee. It was produced, edited, and hosted by Julia Elizabeth Evans and Jared Cassabon, and our theme music is from Noah Vickland. See you in 2 weeks, and keep reading.